I spent 10 years keeping that factory compliant so the city wouldn't shut us down. Then Gavin, the new manager, fired me to save pennies on safety gear. He didn't know I personally held the permit that kept the doors open. I called the zoning board, and by 5 p.m., the sheriff was evicting him. Before this story continues, tell me, where are you watching from today and what's the temperature? The betrayal you are about to see is cold, but the revenge I served was absolutely freezing. The smell of ozone and hydraulic fluid was the first thing that hit you when you walked onto the floor of Apex Manufacturing. To most people, it smelled like industrial waste. To me, it smelled like a decade of my life. I stood on the catwalk overlooking the main assembly line, checking the decibel readings on my tablet. It was 8:15 a.m. on a humid Tuesday in July. My name is Mila, and for the last 10 years, I had been the environmental health and safety manager for this facility. Apex wasn't just any factory. It was a heavy industrial plant grandfathered into a rapidly gentrifying residential neighborhood. On one side of our fence, we had laser cutters and high-pressure molding machines. On the other side, literally 15 feet away, were playgrounds, luxury condos, and a primary school. The only reason the city allowed us to operate here was a fragile, complex legal agreement called a special use permit. I had drafted the compliance protocols myself. I knew every noise ordinance, every air quality standard, and every zoning loophole that kept the lights on. It was a delicate house of cards, and I was the one holding it together. Then, the double doors at the far end of the catwalk burst open. A man I had never seen before strutted in. He looked to be about my age, maybe late 30s, but while I was wearing steel-toed boots and a high-visibility vest, he was wearing a navy blue Italian suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't look at the machinery or the workers. He looked at his phone. This was Gavin, the new plant manager sent by corporate. "You must be Mila," he said, not offering a hand. He stopped beside me, looking down at the factory floor with a sneer of distaste. "It's louder than I expected." "We are running at 84 decibels, I said, tapping my screen. "The legal limit for the residential zone is 85. We are right on the line, Gavin. That's why we run the acoustic dampeners at full power." He laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Dampeners, right. I was looking at the P&L statements this morning on the flight over. Do you know how much we spend on compliance, consumables? Filters, noise reduction padding, chemical disposal." "I know exactly how much," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We spend exactly what is required to keep our license." "We spend too much," Gavin corrected, turning to face me. His eyes were cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of empathy. "Corporate sent me here to trim the fat, Mila. This plant is underperforming. The overhead is ridiculous. I'm going to make this place lean." I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. "Gavin, there is no fat in safety compliance, especially not here. We operate under a special use permit. If we violate the terms, the city can revoke our right to exist in this zone." He waved a hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "Bureaucracy. It's all just paperwork and handshakes. I've run plants in Texas and China. I know how to handle inspectors. We don't need to be Boy Scouts, we just need to be profitable." He started walking toward the office, calling back over his shoulder. "Bring me the vendor contracts for the air filtration system by lunch. I'm canceling that service. We can change the filters in-house once a year instead of every quarter." I stood there, frozen. Changing the filters once a year would clog the vents within 6 months. The particulate matter would drift right into the elementary schoolyard next door. "You can't do that," I whispered to the empty air, but he was already gone. 2 weeks later, the atmosphere in the plant had shifted from productive to toxic. It was 10:00 a.m. on a Monday, and the air inside the facility was noticeably heavier. You could taste the metallic tang on your tongue. Gavin had made good on his threats. He had slashed the budget for waste disposal, reduced the frequency of equipment maintenance, and, worst of all, He had ordered the night shift to bypass the acoustic dampeners to speed up the conveyor belts. I walked into his office without knocking. He was sitting behind his mahogany desk, feet up, staring at a spreadsheet on a massive monitor. "Gavin, we have a problem," I said, placing a printed report on his desk. He didn't move his feet. "Can it wait? I'm finalizing the Q3 projections. We're up 12% since I cut those vendor contracts. Corporate is thrilled." "The neighborhood isn't," I said, pointing at the report. "I've logged 3 noise. Complaints from the condo association since Friday. And the air quality sensors on the north wall, the ones facing the school, are spiking. We are emitting particulate matter at levels that violate our permit." Gavin sighed, finally dropping his feet to the floor. He picked up the report, glanced at it for half a second, and tossed it into the recycling bin. "Sensors glitch all the time, Mila. Stop looking for problems." "I'm not looking for problems, I'm trying to prevent a shutdown," I snapped, my patience fraying. "You don't understand the agreement. This isn't a normal industrial zone. We are guests in a residential area. The special use permit specifically states that any willful violation of safety standards results in immediate revocation. Not a fine, revocation." Gavin stood up, leaning over the desk. He was tall, imposing, and used to intimidation. "Let me explain something to you. I was hired to save this company money. You seem to think your job is to spend it. If the neighbors complain, let them call the hotline. It goes to a voicemail box nobody checks. By the time the city gets around to sending an inspector, we'll clean it up for the day." "That's not how it works here," I insisted. "The city takes this zone seriously." "You're too emotional about this," he said, a patronizing smirk playing on his lips. "You've been here too long, Mila. You've gone native. You care more about the neighbors than the shareholders." "I care about the law," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "The law is flexible," he countered. "Profit margins aren't. Now get out of my office and stop monitoring the sensors. If I catch you wasting time on compliance checks when you should be optimizing the shift schedules, we're going to have a very different conversation." I walked out, my hands trembling. He wasn't just arrogant, he was dangerous. He treated safety regulations like suggestions. I went back to my desk and did the only thing I could do to protect myself. I opened a private folder on my personal cloud drive and started backing up every email, every refusal, and every altered maintenance log. If the ship was going down, I wasn't going to let him drag me under with it. The axe fell 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon. I had just returned from a perimeter check, where I had personally witnessed gray smoke drifting toward the playground, when I was summoned to the conference room. It was 2:30 p.m. The room was cold. Gavin was sitting at the head of the table. Beside him sat the HR representative, a nervous woman named Sarah who wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sit down, Mila," Gavin said. He sounded bored. I sat. I knew what this was. I had been in the corporate world long enough to recognize the setup. "We've been reviewing the staffing structure," Gavin began, clasping his manicured hands together. "As I told you, my mandate is to make this plant lean. We need to cut costs to remain competitive." "And?" I asked, looking directly at him. "And we've decided that the position of EHS manager is redundant for a facility of this size," he said, not blinking. "We are going to outsource safety compliance to a third-party consultant who will come in once a quarter. It's a significant cost saving." My jaw nearly dropped. "You're firing me? To save money? Gavin, you need a full-time compliance officer. The daily reporting requirements for the special use permit alone take 4 hours a day." "We disagree," Gavin said smoothly. "The permit is just a piece of paper. We can automate the reporting. The decision is final, Mila, effective immediately." Sarah slid a folder across the table. "This is your severance package," she murmured. 2 weeks' pay, if you sign the non-disclosure agreement." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at Gavin. He looked triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had just removed the annoying woman who kept nagging him about rules, saving the company my salary in the process. He had absolutely no idea who he was dealing with. He didn't know that the piece of paper he dismissed, the special use permit, had a specific clause in Section 4, Paragraph B, a clause that required a named, certified, full-time safety officer to be on site during all operational hours. He didn't know that by firing me. He had just legally invalidated the factory's right to operate the moment I walked out the door. And he certainly didn't know about Micah. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. A strange calm washed over me. I reached out and took the folder. "Okay," I said quietly. Gavin looked surprised. He had expected a fight. "Okay, just like that." "If that's the company's decision, I accept it," I said, standing up. "I'll pack my things." "Make it quick," Gavin said, checking his watch. "Security will escort you out in 30 minutes. "Don't worry," I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips. "I won't be here long." I walked back to my office, the sounds of the factory floor ring around me. It was the sound of a beast that was about to be put down. I packed my personal items, a photo of my dog, my specialized noise meters, and my Rolodex. I didn't take any company files. I didn't need to. I had the truth, and I had a phone number that hadn't been dialed in years, but was about to become the most important call of my life. Gavin wanted to save money. I was about to cost him everything. The walk from my office to the parking lot is usually a mundane 3-minute trek. That afternoon, at 3:15 p.m., it felt like a funeral procession for a life I used to know. I carried a single cardboard box. It wasn't heavy, just the physical remnants of 10 years of dedication. Behind me, the heavy tread of the security guard's boots on the concrete floor echoed like a metronome counting down the seconds. They hadn't sent Old Tom, the guard I exchanged Christmas cards with. They had sent a contractor, a stranger with a blank face, presumably on Gavin's orders to ensure I didn't sabotage the machinery on my way out. As if I needed to sabotage anything. Gavin had already thrown the wrench into the gears himself. He just wouldn't hear the crunch until it was too late. We passed the break room. Through the glass, I saw a few of the line supervisors, men and women I had fought for during safety committee meetings, looking down at their coffees. They knew. In a factory like this, news travels faster than electricity. They wouldn't look me in the eye. They were terrified. If the safety manager could be gutted like a fish in the middle of a shift, none of them were safe. At the main security gate, Gavin was waiting. He was leaning against the turnstile, checking his watch, the perfect picture of corporate efficiency. He didn't look like a man who had just destroyed a career. He looked like a man who was annoyed that the trash hadn't been taken out fast enough. "Badge and keys," he said, extending a hand without looking up from his phone. I set the box down on the security desk. I unclipped my ID badge, the one with the 10-year service star on it, and placed it in his palm. Then I dropped the master ring of keys. They jingled loudly, a harsh, final sound in the humid afternoon air. "You're making the right choice, Gavin," I said, my voice deceptively sweet. "Streamlining is important." He finally looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes quickly replaced by arrogance. "I'm glad you see it that way. No hard feelings, Mila. It's just business. The industry is changing. We can't afford to be weighed down by outdated overhead." "Outdated overhead," I repeated, tasting the words. "Is that what I was?" "Safety is important," he said, reciting a script. "But we need agility. We can't have a manager stopping the line every time a sensor blinks. We need to run fast." "Well," I said, picking up my box, "you'll certainly be running fast now." He smirked. "Good luck with the job hunt. The market is tough for specialists like you." "Oh, I'm not looking for a job," I replied, stepping through the turnstile. "I'm going to take a little time off. Watch how things unfold." I walked to my car, a sensible 4-door sedan parked in the spot marked Safety Manager. As I loaded the box into the passenger seat, I looked back at the factory one last time. The smokestacks were pumping gray plumes into the blue sky. The hum of the crushers vibrated through the asphalt under my feet. It was a beast of a machine, eating resources and spitting out product. It required a keeper. It required a leash. Gavin had just cut the leash because he thought it cost too much money. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove out of the lot. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I turned on the radio to a classical station, feeling a cold, crystalline clarity settle over me. Gavin thought he had fired an employee. What he had actually done was pull the pin on a grenade, hand it to me, and then ask me to leave the building. I was more than happy to take the grenade with me, because I knew exactly where to throw it back. I arrived home at 4:10 p.m. My apartment was quiet, a stark contrast to the thrumming roar of the factory floor. I made a pot of strong black tea, sat down at my dining table, and opened my personal laptop. Most people leave their work at work. But when your job involves legal compliance for a facility that processes toxic chemicals next to a kindergarten, you keep backups. I had a mirrored drive of every major legal document regarding Apex Manufacturing's site history. I navigated to a folder labeled City Agreements 2015. I clicked on a PDF titled Municipal Special Use Permit Rev 04 PDF. This was the smoking gun. 10 years ago, before Gavin was even a blip on the corporate radar, Apex had faced a crisis. The city council wanted to rezone the entire district from industrial to mixed residential. They wanted the factory gone. They wanted to replace us with coffee shops and loft apartments. I was the one who saved the factory. I was 28, hungry, and brilliant. I sat in a negotiation room for 3 days straight with the City Planning Commission. We hammered out a compromise. The factory could stay, but under strict, draconian conditions known as a non-conforming use with special stipulations. I scrolled down to page 42. There it was, the kill switch. Section 4.1, Mandatory Oversight. Due to the proximity of sensitive receptors, defined as Harriet Tubman Elementary School and Riverview condominiums, the operator Apex Manufacturing agrees to maintain a dedicated, full-time, certified environmental health and safety officer on site during all operational hours. I read the next paragraph aloud to my empty living room, savoring every syllable. Section 4.2, Violation and Revocation. Failure to maintain the personnel requirement outlined in Section 4.1 constitutes an immediate breach of the special use permit. Upon confirmation of such breach, the permit is automatically voided, and the operator must cease all industrial activities immediately. This revocation is non-appealable for a period of 90 days. Gavin thought he was cutting a salary. In reality, he had just legally shut down the factory. The moment he signed my termination letter, the factory became an illegal operation. Every minute the machines ran without me in the building, they were breaking the law, not a slap-on-the-wrist fine law. A sheriff padlocking the gates law. I leaned back in my chair, watching the steam rise from my tea. Gavin was an MBA. He understood spreadsheets, quarterly targets, and labor costs. He saw the world in red and black ink. He didn't understand the invisible web of permits, variances, and grandfather clauses that actually allowed his world to exist. He thought the factory had a right to be there. He didn't realize it was a privilege granted solely because I was there to guarantee safety. He had fired his guarantee. I checked the time, 4:45 p.m. The city offices would be closing in 15 minutes. I could call the hotline now, leave a message, and hope someone picked it up in a week. But that wasn't enough. That wasn't cinematic. I needed this to be fast. I needed it to be brutal. I needed a surgical strike that would leave Gavin with no time to wiggle out, no time to call corporate legal, and no time to hire a temp to fill my seat. I needed a direct line to the person who held the rubber stamp. I closed the PDF and opened my contacts list. I scrolled past pizza and plumber until I found a name I hadn't clicked in 3 years. Micah Reynolds, City Planning Director. We had gone to grad school together. We had studied urban law in the same cramped library carrels. I had bought him drinks when his first marriage fell apart. He had proofread my thesis. We were friends, but more importantly, we were professionals who respected the rules of the game. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the call buttons. Gavin wanted to play hardball. Fine. I was about to bring in the umpire. The next morning, Friday, at 9:00 a.m. sharp, I sat in my car 2 blocks away from City Hall. I hadn't slept well. The adrenaline was still coursing through my system, a humming wire of energy that made my hands shake slightly. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from anticipation. I dialed Micah's personal cell number. It rang 3 times. Mila, the voice was warm, surprised, and unmistakably familiar. I haven't seen that name pop up in ages. Please tell me you're calling to say you're finally leaving that rust bucket of a factory and coming to work for the city. I couldn't help but smile. Hello, Micah, it's good to hear your voice and, well, you're half right. Half right? I could hear the squeak of his office chair as he leaned back. Don't tell me you got fired. You are that factory, Mila. They'd be insane to let you go. They are insane, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. Micah, listen to me. I need to talk to you, not as a friend, but as the director of zoning. The warmth instantly evaporated from his voice, replaced by the sharp, professional tone of a man who dealt with bureaucratic nightmares for a living. What happened? New management, I said. A guy named Gavin, MBA type. He decided safety compliance was overhead. He fired me yesterday afternoon to save money. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. Micah knew. He knew the terms of the deal just as well as I did. He had been the junior planner who stamped the paperwork 10 years ago. He fired you, Micah asked slowly, clarifying the facts. Is there a replacement? Did they hire a new safety officer before letting you go? No, I said. He told me he's outsourcing it to a quarterly consultant. He explicitly stated the position of safety manager is redundant. Jesus, Micah breathed, is the line running? Full capacity, I confirmed. I drove by this morn. Smoke is black. You can hear the stampers from the street. They turned off the acoustic dampeners weeks ago, Micah. I have the logs. He's operating a heavy industrial plant in a residential zone without a compliance officer, Micah said, the disbelief clear in his voice. Does he have a death wish? He has arrogance, I corrected. He thinks the special use permit is just paper. He thinks the city won't notice. Oh, we notice, Micah said, his voice hardening into something akin to steel. Mila, if what you're saying is true, he is in direct violation of the 2015 agreement. That creates a liability exposure for the city. If a kid at that school breathes in 1 microgram of silica dust while we know the site is non-compliant, the city gets sued into oblivion. Exactly, I said. I'm looking at the agreement right now, Micah. Section 4.2, immediate revocation. Immediate, he echoed. Mila, do you have documentation? Did you get it in writing? I have the termination letter stating the position is being eliminated, I said. And I have noise logs and air quality reports from the last 2 weeks showing willful negligence. I can be at your desk in 5 minutes. Get here, Micah said. Park in the visitor lot. Come straight up. I'm going to call the city attorney and the sheriff's civil division. If he wants to save money on safety, let's see how much money he saves when the facility is condemned. I'm on my way, I said. And Mila, Micah added, his voice softening just a fraction. I'm sorry he did this to you. You deserved better. Don't be sorry, I said, putting the car in gear. Just be ready. I hung up the phone. The morning sun was shining, casting long shadows across the dashboard. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Gavin had wanted to make an impact. He had wanted to shake things up. Well, he was about to get an earthquake. By 10:30 a.m., I was sitting in Micah's office on the 4th floor of City Hall. The room smelled of old coffee and floor wax. Across from us sat the assistant city attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Priya, who was currently reading my termination letter as if it were a murder confession. "He actually put this in writing," Priya murmured, shaking her head. "Elimination of role due to cost restructuring. He didn't even try to hide it." Micah was typing furiously on his computer. "I've pulled the permit, it's clear as day. Condition of operation, continuous on-site safety supervision." By removing Mila, he pulled the plug on his own life support. "So what's the move?" I asked, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "Do we send a letter?" Micah stopped typing and looked at me. His eyes were hard. "We don't send letters for immediate public health risks, Mila. We send badges." He picked up his desk phone. "Get me Sheriff Miller. Tell him we have a code red zoning violation at the Apex plant. I need 2 deputies for an enforcement action. Immediate dispatch." He hung up and looked at me. "Do you want to come?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to stay here, safe in the sterile quiet of the government building. But a bigger, darker part of me needed to see it. I needed to see Gavin's face when the reality of his arrogance finally crashed down on him. "Yes," I said, "I want to be there." "Good," Micah said, standing up and grabbing his blazer. "Let's go shut him down." We took a city vehicle, a white SUV with the municipal seal on the door. Micah drove. I sat in the passenger seat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind us, a sheriff's cruiser followed close, its lights off but its presence undeniable. We pulled up to the Apex gates at 11:15 a.m. The security guard, the same contractor from yesterday, looked confused as the convoy stopped. He started to step out of his booth, hand raised to halt us, but Micah didn't stop. He flashed his city credentials through the window and drove straight through the open gate, parking right in front of the main entrance, Gavin's reserved spot. The deputies pulled up behind us, blocking the exit. We got out. The factory was loud, louder than I had ever heard it. The ground was vibrating. I looked up at the smokestacks. Thick, dark gray smoke was billowing out, drifting lazily toward the elementary school. "My God," Micah said, looking up. "He's running the furnaces without the scrubbers." "He saved $15,000 on filters," I said quietly. "He's about to lose $15 million, Micah replied. We walked through the front doors. The receptionist looked up, startled. "Can I help you?" "We're here to see the plant manager," Micah said, not breaking stride. "Now." We didn't wait for her to call. We walked straight past the reception desk, down the hall, and kicked open the double doors to the executive suite. Gavin was in a meeting. He was standing at a whiteboard, marker in hand, lecturing 3 terrified shift supervisors about efficiency metrics. He stopped mid-sentence as the door banged. Open, he turned around, annoyance flashing across his face. When he saw me, his eyes narrowed. Then he saw Micah. Then he saw the 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies standing behind us, hands resting on their belts. The marker dropped from his hand. It clattered loudly on the floor. "What is this?" Gavin demanded, trying to muster his usual authority but failing as his voice cracked slightly. "You can't just barge in here. This is private property." "Not anymore, it isn't," Micah said, stepping forward. He slapped a thick folder onto the conference table. "I'm Micah Reynolds, Director of City Zoning. You are operating this facility in violation of your special use permit." Gavin scoffed, though his eyes were darting nervously to the deputies. "What are you talking about? We have a permit. It's valid until 2028. "Your permit," Micah said, his voice dripping with icy calm, "is conditional. Specifically, Condition 4.1 requiring a full-time, certified safety officer on site. I understand you terminated that officer yesterday afternoon." Gavin looked at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He realized the connection. He realized the mistake. We are in a transition period," Gavin stammered, his face paling. "We are restructuring. I have a consultant coming in next month." "Next month isn't today," Micah said. "The permit requires continuous coverage. You have been operating for 20 hours illegally. And judging by the smoke outside, you've also disabled your environmental controls. Micah pulled a clipboard from his bag. This is a cease and desist order, effective immediately. You can't be serious, Gavin said, sweat beading on his forehead. If I stop the line now, the molten plastic will harden in the injectors. It will ruin the machines. It will cost millions to repair. That sounds like a you problem, Micah said coldly. You have 10 minutes to initiate a controlled shutdown. If the machines are still running at 11:45, the deputies will cut the main power at the substation. That will really ruin your machines. Gavin looked at the supervisors. Don't just stand there, call corporate, get legal on the phone. The supervisors didn't move. They looked at the deputies. They looked at me. Go, one of the deputies said, his voice deep and authoritative. Shut it down, now. The supervisors scrambled out of the room like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Gavin turned on me, his face twisting into a mask of pure venom. You did this, you vindictive little. I didn't do anything, Gavin, I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. I just followed the rules. You're the one who decided they were too expensive. This is sabotage, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. I'll sue you, I'll sue the city. You can try, Priya, the attorney, said from the doorway. But right now, you need to evacuate the building. This is no longer a permitted workplace. It is an illegal industrial hazard zone. Gavin slumped into a chair. The fight went out of him. He looked small. He looked like a man who had bet his entire career on a bluff and had just been called. Outside, the hum of the factory began to die down. The roaring machinery slowed, then stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and terrifying. It was the sound of an empire collapsing. The silence in the factory was eerie. For the first time in 50 years, the heartbeat of the plant had stopped during a shift. Gavin was frantically typing on his phone, likely trying to reach the VP of operations in Chicago. I watched him from across the conference table. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by the frantic, jerky movements of a trapped animal. They're not answering, he muttered to himself. Why aren't they answering? Probably because it's lunchtime in Chicago, I said helpfully. Micah was busy inspecting the violation paperwork with the deputies. Okay, the line is down. Now comes the eviction. Gavin, I need you and all administrative staff to vacate the premises. We are padlocking the gates until a hearing can be scheduled. You can't lock me out of my own plant, Gavin yelled, standing up again. I have sensitive files, I have laptop. Grab your laptop, one of the deputies said. You have 5 minutes. Just then, Gavin's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale. It wasn't the VP, it was the CEO. He answered it on speaker, his hands shaking too much to hold the phone to his ear. Gavin, the voice was deep, gravelly, and terrifyingly calm. It was Mr. Henderson, the CEO of Apex Global. Mr. Henderson, sir, Gavin squeaked. I have a situation here. The local authorities are overreacting to a minor administrative. Shut up, Gavin, Henderson's voice cut through the room like a whip. I just got a call from the mayor. He says you're being evicted. He says our special use permit has been revoked because you fired the safety officer. Is that true? Gavin looked at me. I stared back, unblinking. I was cutting costs, sir, Gavin stammered. The position was redundant, Mila was. Mila was the only reason that plant was open, Henderson roared. The distortion on the speakerphone made it sound like an explosion. I read the file, Gavin. Did you read the file? Did you read the permit conditions before you fired the person responsible for them? I assumed. You assumed, Henderson said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You assumed you knew better than 10 years of legal precedent. You have cost us the entire Q3 production run. Do you know what the penalty is for missing our shipment to Detroit? It's $2 million a day. Gavin was hyperventilating now. Sir, I can fix this. I can hire a consultant. I can. You're done, Gavin, Henderson said. Pack your things. Don't go to the hotel. Go to the airport. You're fired, effective immediately." The line went dead. The room was silent again, save for the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Gavin lowered the phone slowly. He looked at me. There was no hate in his eyes anymore, only shock. He looked like a man who had walked off a cliff and hadn't hit the bottom yet. "He fired me," Gavin whispered. "It's a cost-saving measure," I said, echoing his words from yesterday. "They're trimming the fat." I stood up. "Come on, Gavin, the deputies are waiting. Time to go." I walked out of the conference room, leaving him standing there in the ruins of his own arrogance. I walked out onto the factory floor, where hundreds of workers were gathering, confused and worried. I saw Big Mike, the union rep. He saw me and walked over. "Mila," he asked, "what's going on? They shut the line down. Are we out of a job?" This was the part I hated, the collateral damage. "The plant is closed for now, Mike," I said gently, "but the union contract has a clause for management negligence. You all get paid full wages during a shutdown caused by permit violations. I made sure of that in the last negotiation." Mike's eyes widened. "You did?" "I did," I said. "Tell the guys to go home, enjoy the paid vacation. This might take a while to sort out." Mike grinned. "Thanks, Mila, you always looked out for us." "Always," I said. I walked out into the sunlight. Micah was waiting by the city SUV. He looked tired but satisfied. "Well," he said, "that went well." "Better than I expected," I admitted. "So," Micah said, opening the car door, "what now?" I looked back at the silent factory. The smoke was clearing. The noise was gone. The neighborhood was quiet. "Now," I said, "I wait for the phone to ring." Because I knew Henderson wasn't done. He had fired Gavin, but he still had a factory to save. And there was only one person on Earth who could save it. That evening, the silence in my neighborhood was deafening. For the first time in 10 years, the low-frequency hum of the Apex plant was gone. The ground didn't vibrate. The air smelled like rain and cut grass, not ozone and burning plastic. I sat on my balcony at 7:00 p.m. with a glass of wine. My phone was on the table, face up. It had been ringing nonstop since 2:00 p.m. First, it was Sarah from HR, leaving voicemail after voicemail, her voice trembling, begging me to pick up so we could discuss a misunderstanding regarding my separation. Then, it was the VP of Operations, a man who had never spoken to me in his life, leaving a message saying that Gavin had acted without authorization and that they wanted to make things right immediately. Finally, at 6:45 p.m., a number I didn't recognize popped up. It was a Chicago area code. I let it ring. I wasn't playing hard to get. I was letting them sweat. Every hour the factory sat idle cost them roughly $80,000 in lost productivity and penalties. They were bleeding cash, and I was the only tourniquet in town. I took a sip of wine and looked at the factory in the distance. The lights were off in the production bays. Only the emergency security lights were on. It looked like a tomb. At 7:15 p.m., my phone rang again. Same Chicago number. I picked it up. "This is Mila," I said calmly. "Mila, this is Robert Henderson, CEO of Apex Global." His voice was tired. The gravelly rage from the speakerphone earlier was gone, replaced by the grim pragmatism of a man trying to save a sinking ship. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," I said. "I'm going to cut to the chase," he said. "Gavin is gone. He's on a plane back to Chicago to clear out his desk. His decision to terminate you was ill-advised. It was a catastrophic error in judgment." "It was a breach of contract," I corrected. "A breach of the special use permit, Section 4.2. "I am aware," Henderson said heavily. "I have the city attorney on the other line. They are preparing a permanent revocation order. Mila, if that order goes through, we lose the site. We lose the machinery. We lose $70 million in assets." "That sounds stressful." I said, swirling my wine. "We need you back," Henderson said. "We need you to call the zoning board. We need you to tell them that you have been reinstated, retroactive to yesterday, that there was no lapse in coverage, that it was a clerical error." "But it wasn't a clerical error," I said. "Gavin fired me. He looked me in the eye and told me I was redundant." "I am prepared to offer you a significant raise," Henderson said quickly. "A 20% increase and a $10,000 signing bonus. Just come back tomorrow morning and fix this." I looked at the dark factory. I thought about the 10 years I had spent stressing over decibel readings. I thought about the holidays I had missed to supervise filter changes. I thought about Gavin's sneer. "No," I said. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Excuse me," Henderson asked, "did you say no?" "I did," I said. "I'm not coming back, Mr. Henderson, not for 20%, not for 50%. "Mila, be reasonable," he snapped, the desperation leaking through. "You have a mortgage, you have bills. You can't just walk away from a job like this." "Actually, I can," I said, "because I realized something today. Gavin was right about one thing. The industry is changing, and I don't want to work for a company that views safety as a line item to be deleted." "Name your price," Henderson said, "whatever it is." "My price is that I don't want to work for you," I said firmly. "But I might be willing to help you avoid a total loss." "What do you mean?" "I won't come back as an employee," I said, "but I will come back as an independent consultant. My rate is $300 an hour with a minimum retainer of $50,000 paid up front. I will help you navigate the shutdown. I will help you decommission the site properly so the city doesn't sue you for environmental damages. But the factory stays closed. The neighborhood wins." "You want us to close?" Henderson asked, sounding horrified. "Mr. Henderson, you're already closed," I said. "The sheriff posted the eviction notice at 5:00 p.m. The only question now is whether you leave with your equipment or if the city seizes it for scrap to pay the fines. You need me to negotiate the surrender." He was silent for a long time. He knew I was right. Without a safety officer, they couldn't turn the machines on to even test them, let alone run production. They were dead in the water. "Fine," he whispered. "Send over the contract." "I'll have my lawyer drafted in the morning," I said. "Have a good night, Mr. Henderson." I hung up. The next morning, I drove to the factory one last time. The gates were padlocked with heavy yellow chains. A sheriff's deputy was parked in the lot, ensuring no one entered. Micah was there, leaning against his car. He smiled when he saw me. "Henderson called the mayor," Micah said. "They're throwing in the towel. They're going to liquidate the site. They just want to get their expensive machines out before we seize the land." "I know," I said. "I'm consulting on the extraction. It's going to be a very lucrative month for me." Micah laughed. "You're incredible, Mila. You took down a multinational corporation in 24 hours. "They took themselves down," I said. "I just opened the door." It has been 6 months since Apex Manufacturing closed its doors for good. The factory is gone now. The building was sold to a developer who is turning the shell into a mixed-use space, art studios, a brewery, and a massive indoor rock climbing gym. The smokestacks were taken down last week. The air in the neighborhood has never been cleaner. As for me, I didn't go back to the corporate grind. The $50,000 retainer from Henderson gave me the cushion I needed to launch Mila Compliance Solutions. The life twist I didn't see coming. My biggest client isn't a factory, it's the city. Micah hired my firm to audit every industrial site in the tri-state area. I now walk into factories with the authority of the city behind me. I don't beg managers to follow the rules anymore. I tell them to, or I shut them down. I make double my old salary. I work 4 days a week. And nobody, absolutely nobody, calls me overhead. I'm sitting on my porch now. It's a Tuesday morning. The air is crisp. I can hear the birds singing, a sound that used to be drowned out by the thrum of the crushers. I look back at the woman I was 6 months ago, stressed, underappreciated, holding onto a job out of fear. And I realize how close I came to losing everything by trying to save a company that didn't care about me. If you are in a position where you are the gatekeeper, whether it's safety, finance, or legal, listen to me closely. First, know your leverage. I survived because I knew the regulations better than my boss. I knew where the power actually lay. Don't just do your job, understand why your job exists and what happens if you aren't there. That no. Ledge is your armor. Second, keep the receipts. When Gavin started cutting corners, I didn't just complain, I documented. I saved the emails, the logs, and the reports. When the time came, I didn't need to argue. I just had to show the proof. Documentation is the difference between a he said she said argument and a lawsuit you win. Third, loyalty is a two-way street. I spent 10 years protecting Apex. They fired me in 10 minutes to save a few bucks. Never set yourself on fire to keep a company warm. They will replace you in a heartbeat. You need to look out for yourself, your integrity, and your future. I didn't just get revenge, I got my life back. And let me tell you, the view from here is spectacular. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to join us for the next one.